am a woman in my 50s now, living a life filled with faith and deep gratitude. But where it truly began was long before that, when I was just a small girl named Faiza, growing up in a warm, gentle Muslim home where love was as constant as the call to prayer. Our house stood in a quiet neighborhood where children played barefoot in dusty streets, and the scent of cardamom tea drifted through open windows. My mother's soft voice often carried the rhythm of her prayers, rising before dawn, while my father's calm tone guided me through the words of the Quran. Their devotion was steady, like the heartbeat of our home. Life felt certain, sheltered, and beautifully simple. Then when I was 7 years old, everything began to shift. It started with a fever that seemed harmless at first, the kind that usually passed after a few days. But this one didn't. My body weakened until I could barely move, each breath scraping through my chest as if the air itself resisted me. I remember the way my mother's hands trembled as she pressed a damp cloth to my forehead, whispering prayers that wove together fear and faith. My father tried to stay strong, but I saw how his eyes betrayed him. He consulted doctors, pleaded for guidance from the imam, invited him to our home to pray beside my bed. Still, nothing changed. The nights became longer, filled with muffled sobs and the smell of rose water that my mother sprinkled around me. I can still hear the hum of the ceiling fan turning above, slow and tired, like it too had lost strength. My little brother, barely 4, would peek into the room holding his toy car, confused by the silence. My mother stayed at my side, her hand never leaving mine, as if her touch could pull me back from whatever edge I was nearing. "Faiza, my precious girl, stay with us," she pleaded, her voice shaking with both hope and terror. Days blurred into nights and time lost meaning. All I could feel was pain, heavy, pressing, endless. I watched my father pace the room, his lips moving silently in prayer, his eyes red from sleeplessness. The imam spoke words of comfort, assuring them that Allah's will would decide my fate. But even as he said it, I could sense the chaos stirring around us, the quiet panic that no one dared to name. My chest burned like fire. My vision began to fade in and out, colors draining into a strange stillness. I remember thinking that if I closed my eyes long enough, maybe I would wake up somewhere peaceful. I didn't know that something far greater was about to begin. One night, as my body burned with fever and the weight of the illness seemed too much to bear, I felt something shift. It was like the very air around me had changed, lighter somehow, as if the crushing burden of the world had lifted. The pain, which had been gnawing at me for what felt like forever, began to fade, melting into a strange, numbing calm. I could feel my body weakening, growing heavy, but in a way I also felt weightless. The room grew dimmer, like the lights were turning down on a stage, and everything around me, the walls, the voices, faded into the background, growing distant. I was there, yet not. It's hard to explain, but it felt as if I was hovering just above myself, watching everything below me from a far-off place, as though I was both part of it and completely apart from it all. I could see my parents, their faces streaked with tears. My mother's hands, trembling, were on my shoulders, gently shaking me, trying to pull me back from somewhere I couldn't follow. Her voice cracked with worry, calling my name over and over, but it sounded so far away. My father stood next to her, frozen, as though time had stopped for him. His face, a mask of helplessness, was a mixture of confusion and fear. I could see them clearly, but the emotions they were radiating didn't seem to reach me anymore. There was no panic in me, no rush to make them understand I was still there. I was no longer tethered to the little, fragile body below me. I wanted to comfort them, to tell them I was fine, but I couldn't. I couldn't even speak. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a glow, a soft, inviting light that seemed to fill the space in a way nothing else ever could. But it wasn't just light. It was warmth. It was comfort. It was pure, unconditional love. The kind of love you can't even imagine. The kind you only feel in the deepest corners of your heart. The light wasn't blinding or harsh. It didn't pull at me with force, but it held an undeniable power, like it was patiently waiting for me to choose, to take that first step toward it. At first, I hesitated. I thought of my parents, of how heartbroken they would be if I left them. My mother's prayers still echoed in my mind, her words full of fear and love. I wondered, was it wrong to move toward this light? Was I abandoning them? The thought of leaving them behind filled me with guilt, and I wanted to stay with them to somehow ease their pain. But the light didn't push me. It didn't demand anything. It simply whispered, not with words, but with a feeling that I couldn't ignore. It was like the light was telling me, "Come closer. You are safe here." And so, I moved toward it. The closer I got, the more I felt the immense love that radiated from it. For the first time in days, the fever, the pain, the fear, everything just melted away. There was nothing left but peace. It wasn't the kind of peace you find on a calm day. It was deeper than that, more profound. It was the peace of knowing you were finally home. As I moved closer, I began to sense that I wasn't alone. There was something or someone waiting for me. A presence. A being that I couldn't see with my eyes, but I could feel it in every part of me. Strong, loving, familiar. It was as if this presence knew everything about me. Every fear, every dream, every prayer my parents had whispered into the night. It knew me completely and loved me without question, without judgment. And in that moment, I understood. This presence wasn't just there for me. It was with me, and it was guiding me towards something greater. The light grew brighter, and the presence grew clearer, and I felt myself being drawn towards something I couldn't begin to comprehend. This wasn't just about me. It was about something far bigger, something beyond anything I had ever imagined. And though I couldn't see it fully yet, I knew in my heart that this was only the beginning. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the journey. I remember the moment when I truly left my body. It's something that will never leave me. One moment, I was lying in bed, burning with fever, barely able to keep my eyes open. My little hands were limp in my mother's desperate grip, her tears dripping onto my face. And then, in the blink of an eye, I was no longer there. I wasn't in my body anymore. I was above it, floating, looking down at the scene below me as if it were happening to someone else. It was terrifying and peaceful at the same time. I was untethered, free, but at the same time, I had no idea what was happening. From above, I could see my parents. My mother was beside me, holding me close, her face twisted in sorrow. My father stood nearby, his hands clasped together in silent prayer, his mouth moving in words I couldn't hear. I saw my siblings standing at the door, their eyes wide with fear, their small hands tightly gripping each other, like they were trying to hold on to some shred of hope, something that would make the pain stop. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was still here, that I hadn't gone anywhere, but no sound came out. I couldn't reach them. There were no arms, no voice, only me, a floating consciousness caught in the space between their grief and my own confusion. It felt like being caught in a storm, a chaos of emotions, but still somehow safe, untouchable. It was in that moment that I knew I wasn't gone, not yet. I hadn't left them for good. But where I was headed, I didn't fully understand, not yet. It started quietly, almost hidden, like the faintest shimmer in the far corner of the room. I barely noticed it at first, just a soft glow against the tired light of the bedside lamp. But then it grew, stronger, fuller, until it filled every inch of the room with a presence that was impossible to ignore. The air itself seemed to breathe with it. This wasn't just light, it was alive. It was warmth and kindness woven together, a love that didn't need to speak to be understood. It called to me, not with sound, but with something deeper, something that reached straight into who I was. I didn't walk, I didn't rise, I was simply drawn toward it, as if it recognized me, as if it had been waiting all along. The heaviness in my chest disappeared. The pain, the weakness, the noise of the hospital faded until only peace remained. It was the first time in so long that I felt completely whole. The light moved like a living thing, wrapping around me, holding me with a gentleness I didn't know existed. I looked back and saw the hospital bed, my small body lying still, my mother's hands gripping mine, my father's lips moving in prayer. Their faces were wet with tears, their hearts breaking in the same rhythm as the monitors beside them. I could feel their sorrow, but it was distant, like it belonged to a world that no longer had weight. I hesitated. I wasn't ready to let them go. I wanted to reach out, to tell them I was still here. But my arms were no longer mine to move. The light waited, patient, still, endlessly kind. It didn't force or demand. It simply held the space, letting me choose. Was it wrong to want peace? Would they understand? My heart trembled at the thought. But then, in the silence, I felt something soft and wordless move through me. It said, not in sound, but in knowing. It's all right, you are safe. I exhaled, if you could call it that. I let go, not of love, not of them, but of fear. And the shift began. The world around me dissolved into silence. My mother's cries, my father's whispered pleas, gone, like waves retreating from the shore. The walls, the machines, the weight of pain and chaos all melted away. What replaced it was light, pure and endless, stretching beyond sight or thought. It wasn't emptiness. It was fullness. It was like being pulled into the heartbeat of something eternal. The deeper I moved, the more I felt a presence waiting for me inside that light. It wasn't faceless energy. It was someone who knew every part of me, every mistake, every secret, every fragile hope, and loved me still. I felt small and infinite at once. My heart wanted to weep, but there were no tears in this place, only peace. The closer I came, the more the light became a vision, clear, alive, powerful. I could almost make out a form, though it was more felt than seen. And just as I was about to step across, the brilliance deepened until it filled everything, even my thoughts. I wasn't afraid. I knew this was where truth lived. I knew that whatever waited beyond that final veil would change me forever. Then the light pulled me closer into something vast, something beyond every word I've ever known. I stepped further into the light, the warmth of it wrapping around me like a comforting embrace, filling every part of me. It wasn't blinding, not in a harsh way, but it was more brilliant than anything I had ever known. The light wasn't just light. It carried a presence, a feeling of life, of pure existence, as though the very essence of being was alive in it, coursing through me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt fully, completely alive, as though every cell in my body was humming with the most beautiful energy. And then, from within the glow, something started to take shape. At first, it was just a blur, an indistinct form, not quite human, but not something else either, something more. But as it came closer, the edges sharpened, and I saw the figure clearly. It was him, Jesus. I didn't have to ask, didn't need anyone to tell me. I just knew. His presence wasn't just seen, it was felt. It was as though his love for me was a force, wrapping around me, holding me up. It was overwhelming, too much, and yet it felt like exactly what I needed. He stepped forward, his face now fully visible, and there was nothing in this world that could prepare me for what I saw. His eyes, those eyes were full of love, full of knowing, as though he had always known me, not just from a distance, but in a way that went beyond anything I could understand. His voice called my name, Faiza. When he said my name, it was as if he had always known me, even before I knew myself. Not just the name Faiza, but everything, the deepest parts of me, the parts I never even shared with myself. In that moment, I felt so seen, so understood, in a way I had never felt before. Not as a little girl, not as a person trying to find her way, but as someone who had always mattered deeply to him. Faiza, he said again, and this time it was different. His voice was filled with warmth, a kind of love that soothed every fear I had ever carried. You've been so brave. The words settled into me and I was frozen, not knowing how to respond. My heart was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. How could this be real? How could he be here, standing in front of me? I had always been taught of him, sure, but never like this. Not in this way. I'd always thought of Jesus as a distant figure, someone revered but not personal. But standing here now, I knew I was wrong. The question came out of me, soft and unsure. Why am I here? His gaze never wavered, and his answer was simple, yet it shook me to the core. You are here because I love you. His words weren't just words, they felt like the truth of the universe, a truth so deep it resonated in my bones. He paused, looking into me as though he could see into the very heart of my soul. You've always been mine, Faiza, even when you didn't know it. Tears came to my eyes, a flood I couldn't control. There was something in the way he looked at me, something so pure, so knowing, that it was impossible to question. Still, there was resistance in me. How could this be real? How could this fit with everything I had been taught? I had been raised in a faith that was different, a different path to understanding God. I had believed in something else, followed teachings that didn't speak of Jesus the way he was speaking to me now. Was it all wrong? Before I could ask, he seemed to sense my confusion. He knelt, bringing himself to my eye level, his expression calm yet full of gravity. His gaze softened as he said, "You've always sought the truth, Faiza, and I am the truth." The words hit me like a wave. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to understand, to make sense of it all, but the more he spoke, the more I felt the chaos inside me calm. The love you've known, the faith you've practiced, it was never wrong. But there is more, Faiza, and I want you to see it. There was a pause. My head was spinning, the weight of everything threatening to pull me under. But how can this be? My family, my prayers, all we've believed, are you saying it wasn't real? He shook his head, the look on his face gentle but resolute. Your prayers were heard. Your faith was real, Faiza, but there is a greater truth, one that fulfills everything you've ever longed for. It's not about what was wrong, it's about what is complete. As he spoke, something incredible began to happen. Images started to appear, as though the light itself was painting scenes in the air around us. I saw moments from my life, times when I had prayed, when I had felt lost, when I had cried out in fear. In every one of those moments, I realized he had been there, standing right beside me, even when I didn't know it. Then, without warning, the vision shifted. It began not as a dream, but as something far more real, as if the world itself had fallen away, and I was standing in a place beyond time. The air shimmered with light that seemed alive, breathing, pulsing with something I could only call truth. I saw stories I had once heard in passing, pieces of the Bible that had never felt personal before. But now they unfolded before my eyes like living moments. Not words on a page, but scenes bursting with life and sound and feeling. I saw Jesus moving among the people, touching the broken, lifting the forgotten. He healed the sick with hands that carried both power and tenderness. He fed the hungry, and I could almost smell the bread, fresh and warm, carried by the wind. I saw him sit beside a crying child, his voice soft, his eyes full of understanding. Every gesture was simple, but filled with purpose, as if every heartbeat of his carried meaning too deep for words. Then everything changed. The light around me dimmed, and I stood before the cross. He was there, not in some distant, untouchable way, but right in front of me. His face held both pain and love, and I felt it pierce through my soul. I could see the blood, the dust, the trembling of his hands, yet even in that chaos, his eyes met mine. It was as though time froze, and only that moment existed. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper as tears ran down my cheeks. "Why would you do this?" "Because I love you," he said, his voice steady and clear, cutting through everything. "And because love is the only way to truly save the world." The words sank into me like fire and water at once. I didn't understand all that he was showing me, but I felt it, deep, real, undeniable. He wasn't just a teacher, not just a prophet or a story told by others. He was the answer to the emptiness I had carried for so long, to the questions I hadn't even known were buried inside me. "But I don't deserve this," I said, trembling. "I've failed too many times. I've doubted, I've done wrong." "You don't have to be perfect," he said gently. "Grace isn't something you earn, Faiza. It's a gift. It's yours, freely given." That name, my name, sounded different when he spoke it. It carried weight, tenderness, truth. I had grown up believing that goodness had to be earned, that forgiveness came through perfection. But here he was, looking at me as if all my failures had already been washed away. A warmth began to rise in me, slow, steady, complete. It felt like standing under sunlight after a long storm. All the weight I had been carrying, the guilt, the striving, the need to prove myself, began to fade. In its place came peace, real peace, the kind I had never known before. "Do you trust me, Faiza?" Jesus asked. His eyes searched mine. I nodded. Not because I understood everything, but because I wanted to. I wanted to believe that his words were true, that love could be stronger than corruption, stronger than pain, stronger than everything I had been afraid of. "Then come with me," he said, standing and extending his hand. "There's more I want to show you." I reached for him. His hand was warm, firm, alive, and in that touch I felt strength I didn't know I had. The light around us began to shift again, flowing like water, changing shape and color. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with something close to awe. The warmth around me deepened, then opened into something vast. The ground dissolved beneath my feet, and suddenly I was no longer standing in light at all, but floating in a realm beyond anything I could name. It felt as if I were everywhere and nowhere, carried by the rhythm of something greater than time itself. The air around me carried a calm so deep it felt alive. Yet beneath that calm was something urgent, a quiet pulse telling me that something vast, something beyond understanding, was about to be revealed. Then, without warning, everything shifted. I was no longer where I had been. I stood at the threshold of a place that seemed to breathe with light and music. Heaven. It wasn't just beautiful, it was whole. Every sound, every color, every movement was soaked in meaning. The light here wasn't just shining, it moved like a living spirit, touching everything with warmth that reached into me. It filled every part of my being with a love so pure it erased all fear, all doubt. I looked around and saw people everywhere, countless souls, glowing with peace. Their faces were familiar, though I couldn't name them. Some waved, some sang, their laughter carrying through the air like sunlight turned into sound. It felt as if the very rhythm of their joy matched the heartbeat of creation. I noticed my grandmother there, her eyes clearer than I remembered, her smile brighter than any dawn I had ever seen. Beside her stood a child holding a small white dove, looking at me with trust that felt eternal. Then I felt him, a presence so strong and gentle that every part of me bowed inside. Jesus stood beside me, his face radiant with compassion. And yet, even greater than that was what surrounded us, the essence of God himself, flowing like an endless ocean of love. It wasn't just around me, it was in me. His love held every sound, every color, every soul together in perfect peace. "This is heaven," Jesus said. His voice carried both joy and sorrow, as if he knew what I would soon see. "This is what I have prepared for those who accept my grace." I couldn't find words. My heart swelled with a longing so deep it hurt. I wanted to stay, to dissolve into that love, to never return. But then everything began to change again. The warmth faded, the light dimmed, the laughter grew distant. I felt a shift, a pull that left me breathless. The brightness gave way to something heavy, thick, and cold. Suddenly, I stood in a place I did not want to see. Darkness surrounded me. The air itself seemed to carry the taste of sorrow. This was not merely the absence of light, it was the absence of love. I knew at once I was standing at the edge of hell. Where heaven had sung with harmony, this place screamed with silence. Every sound was a cry, every breath a memory of something lost. Faces emerged from the shadows, twisted with regret. They were not being burned or whipped, their torment was deeper. It was knowing what they had turned away from. I could feel it, the endless echo of what could have been. Their cries weren't for escape, they were for forgiveness that could no longer reach them. The sound cut through me like a storm. Jesus stood beside me still, his expression filled with sorrow. "This is the reality of separation from God," he said quietly. "It is not corruption or revenge. It is what happens when love is rejected." Tears streamed down my face. I wanted to reach them, to help, to change their story, but I couldn't. Their choices were fixed, their path sealed. My chest ached with pain so sharp it felt like my spirit would break. The pressure was too much to bear, and in that crushing weight, I turned to Jesus, my voice shaking like a child lost in the storm. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, barely able to stand under the heaviness of what I felt. He looked at me with eyes that carried both sorrow and love so deep it silenced everything inside me. "Because you must understand the power of grace," he said. His tone was calm, but it carried through me like thunder rolling through the sky. "You've been taught to chase salvation through effort, to earn God's favor through deeds and rules. But grace is not earned. It's a gift I give freely to all who will accept it." The word grace felt strange in my mouth, like something I had said before but never tasted. I stood there, watching the light around him shift like waves on still water. As Jesus spoke, something inside me broke open. Grace wasn't about being perfect or checking every box of faith. It wasn't about working harder to deserve love. It was about receiving love that was already mine, given without condition, given because God's heart never runs dry. "But why me?" I asked, my voice thin and shaking. "Why would you give this to me?" He smiled, soft, knowing, patient. "Because I love you," he said simply. "And because you have a purpose, Faiza. Your life is not an accident. Your pain has meaning, and I will use it. The corruption you've seen, the chaos you've walked through, it will not destroy you. It will become your message. I have a plan for you, one that will bring light into dark places." His words hit me like a song I had always known but forgotten how to sing. The air around us shimmered. I saw flashes of my life. The cold hospital room where I once sat alone, the night I cried out for help in silence, the day I almost gave up. All of it was still there, but it no longer defined me. His love reached deeper than every scar. Jesus reached out his hand again, light moving through his fingers like living fire. Faiza, will you accept my grace? Will you let me lead you? My heart broke open and tears fell freely. I nodded. Yes, I said, voice breaking. Yes, I will. The moment the words left my mouth, warmth spread through me, flooding every shadow I'd carried for years. It was a shift, sudden and holy. I felt weight lift from me. Memories, guilt, shame, melting into light. It was as though I was being remade from the inside out. The air pulsed with life, and every part of me felt new. Jesus smiled, and the brightness around us deepened until it was almost blinding. It's time to go back now, he said, his voice steady, filled with both love and something like sadness. There's more for you to do. My heart ached. But I don't want to leave, I whispered. I don't want to lose this. He reached out, touching my shoulder gently. I know, he said, but your story isn't over. What you've seen here, what you felt, it's not only for you. You must share it. Tell them. Let them know my grace is for them too. Something stirred inside me, quiet but strong. A purpose, burning like a small flame. I didn't know what waited for me on the other side of that light. But I knew I would never be the same again. And as the light began to fade, when I opened my eyes, the light above me felt too sharp, too cold, as if I had been dropped back into the world from someplace far away. Faces swam into focus, wet with tears, trembling with hope. My mother was there, her fingers gripping mine so tightly that I could feel her heartbeat through her skin. Her lips moved in silent prayer, her shoulders shaking. Behind her stood my father, his eyes wide, disbelieving, as if I were a stranger returned from another world. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. The hospital walls, the smell of medicine, the steady rhythm of the machines, it all seemed less real than the radiant vision I had just come from. Faiza, my mother whispered, her voice breaking, can you hear me? I nodded faintly. The moment I did, the room filled with cries. Raw, joyful, human cries. My brothers and sisters clung to one another, thanking God, their faces wet and shining. Nurses froze mid-step. Doctors exchanged wide-eyed looks. I caught bits of their words. Impossible, miracle, no medical explanation. I tried to rise, but my body felt strange. Light, like it wasn't completely mine yet. My skin tingled as if every cell remembered something my mind could barely hold. I still felt the warmth of Jesus, the stillness of his light wrapped around me. There was peace inside me, deep and calm, but I didn't know how to share it. How could I tell them where I had been? How could I describe the shift between life and what lay beyond it? My father leaned close, his hand trembling against my cheek. You were gone, he whispered. They said there was no hope. His voice cracked like something breaking. I looked into his eyes and felt tears sting my own. I'm here, I said softly. I'm okay. But I wasn't just okay. Something inside me was new. Different, like the air itself had entered my veins. The pain that had haunted me for months, that had eaten away at my strength, was gone, completely gone. I moved my fingers, my arms, my legs. No weakness, no ache. I felt alive, reborn. Doctors ran tests, their faces turning pale as numbers and scans failed to make sense. My mother's voice trembled between laughter and disbelief. How could this happen? Is it real? Is she truly healed? Finally, the lead doctor sighed, pressing his palms together as if in surrender. There's no trace of the illness, he said quietly. It's like it never existed. The room went still. My mother fell to her knees, sobbing with joy. My father began to pray aloud, words of gratitude filling the air. I watched them, unable to speak. I wanted to tell them that it was real, that what I had seen, who I had met, was beyond anything I had ever imagined. But my voice caught in my throat. Not yet. The truth was too large to release. Days turned into weeks, and whispers spread through our neighborhood like wind through dry grass. People came to see me. Old friends, cousins, even neighbors I barely knew. Each one bringing something small. Flowers, soup, questions. They wanted to touch my hands, to look into my eyes, to see for themselves that I had truly lived through chaos and come back whole. I smiled, nodded, thanked them, but said little. How could I tell them what really happened? That in that other place I had met Jesus. And he had spoken not just to my ears, but to my soul. That he had shown me the corruption of fear and the beauty that comes after surrender. That he had given me a message I could not yet share. The truth waited inside me like a flame hidden beneath my ribs. Every night, when the house went quiet, I would sit by the window and watch the city lights flicker below. Somewhere in that silence, I felt the same presence again, the peace, the love, the purpose. I knew life would never be the same, but I didn't yet know what to do with the message I carried. And so I kept my secret close. Every time I tried to rest, his face would rise behind my eyes, bright and alive, filled with a love that felt larger than the world itself. His voice lingered inside me, steady and warm, saying I had a purpose, that my story was far from done. Those words played in my head like a song that wouldn't stop. Your story isn't over. But what story? What purpose? I was still broken, still afraid, standing in the middle of the shift between life and something beyond it, and I didn't even know where to start. When the house fell silent and everyone was asleep, I would sit by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the floor. I talked to Jesus in my own words, not the polished ones I had learned as a child. My voice would crack sometimes. I would whisper things I had never told anyone. I asked for direction, for courage, for something real that would help me keep walking through the pain and the chaos I still carried inside. One night, as the rain tapped softly against the glass, I felt it again. That peace, that stillness that wrapped around me like invisible arms. It was the same peace I had felt in his presence, the same quiet that had filled the air when the world had faded and only his light remained. In that stillness, I knew he was near. I could almost hear him breathing beside me. I could almost see his eyes, kind but fierce, reminding me that I wasn't alone, that corruption and fear had no power over what he had already claimed. Something inside me shifted that night. I realized that what I had seen, what I had felt, wasn't only meant for me. It was meant to be shared, one day, not yet. I wasn't ready. I wanted to hold it close a little longer, to understand it, to let it shape me before I spoke of it aloud. So I made a promise in that quiet room. I would learn more about Jesus. I would wait until the vision became clear, until I could speak it without trembling. But even as I kept it hidden, the change in me began to speak for itself. My family noticed first. My mother said my eyes looked different, softer somehow, like they had seen something too great for words. My brother asked why I no longer woke up crying in the night. My friends said I carried peace like a light on my shoulders. They were right. The fear that had once filled me was gone, replaced by a calm I couldn't explain. Even pain felt lighter, like it no longer ruled me. The anger I had carried through my illness had faded too. Where there had been bitterness, there was now gratitude. Where there had been exhaustion, there was quiet strength. I still had questions. I still had doubts. But beneath it all was one truth I could not deny. Jesus had saved me, not just my body, but my soul. That night, sitting by the same window where it had all begun, I looked out at the stars scattered like promises across the dark sky. My hands shook as I whispered into the stillness, "Thank you. Thank you for another chance. Thank you for the truth. Help me to know when to share it and how." As the sky began to lighten and the first trace of dawn touched the edge of the world, I felt something stir within me, a quiet promise that when the time was right, the words would come. When night wrapped the house in silence, I would sit beneath the faint glow of a bedside lamp, the Bible I had borrowed in secret resting in my hands. Its thin pages rustled like whispers in the dark. The book felt unfamiliar, yet alive, as if the words were reaching into a hollow part of me I had never known existed. Ever since my encounter with Jesus, I had been restless. The world around me seemed unchanged, but inside a shift had taken place, quiet yet unstoppable. Each page opened something deeper. The stories of love, grace, and forgiveness hit me harder than I expected. They weren't cold laws written in stone. They were alive, breathing, real. I had grown up chasing perfection, fearing every mistake. But here was Jesus, offering mercy not as a reward, but as a gift. I would pause often, my eyes blurring with tears, asking in silence, could it really be this simple? Most nights, I would sit for hours, the air heavy with thought and the faint scent of jasmine oil that my mother used to burn in the hallway. Sometimes, I would trace the lines of the text with my finger, hoping the truth would seep through my skin. Yet part of me trembled. If anyone found out, what would they say? Was I betraying everything I had been taught since birth? Still, the memory of Jesus, his face radiant with light, his voice cutting through the pain and chaos, was more real than any rule or warning I'd ever heard. The secret grew heavy inside me. I needed to release it. After days of inner battle and prayer, I decided to tell my oldest friend, Faiza. She had been there through every season of my life. The school days, the laughter, the tears we never told our parents about. She knew the shape of my silence. That afternoon, sunlight poured through her living room window, scattering across the floor. The smell of mint tea filled the air as I held my cup, my hands trembling slightly. My voice cracked as I whispered, "Faiza, there's something I have to tell you." She leaned forward, eyes searching mine. "You can tell me anything," she said softly. So I did. Every word poured out, the illness, the fading of my breath, the vision, the moment I met Jesus, and the healing that followed. Her face shifted slowly, her brows drawing together in confusion, then wonder. When I finished, silence stretched between us. I could hear my heartbeat, steady but fierce. Finally, she spoke, her voice thin but sincere. "Faiza, that's incredible. But Jesus, are you sure?" Tears filled my eyes. "I know it sounds impossible," I said, "but it happened. He spoke to me. He showed me a truth I can't turn away from." Faiza sat back, shaking her head lightly, eyes glistening. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, "but I believe you. I've known you too long not to." Her words broke something open in me. The fear loosened its grip. For the first time, I felt a fragile thread of hope. Days later, with her quiet encouragement, I found myself walking into a small church on the edge of town. My heart pounded as the doors closed behind me. I had wrapped a light scarf around my head, not to hide, but to feel some sense of courage. The people inside turned toward me, not with suspicion, but with warmth. Their smiles were open, their voices kind. When the pastor began to speak of Jesus' love and sacrifice, it felt as if every word was aimed straight at my soul. The same voice I had heard beyond the veil echoed now through his sermon, clear and steady. Tears streamed down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Truly, deeply seen. Not by anyone on earth, not by any human eyes, but by God himself. The weight of that moment, the knowing that he knew me completely inside and out, it was overwhelming in the best way possible. For the first time, I wasn't just another face in the crowd. I was someone who mattered to the creator of the universe. Over the next few weeks, I found myself attending more and more gatherings. It wasn't about being loud or standing out. It was about quietly observing, listening, and learning. Each person I met had a story. Stories of faith, transformation, struggle, and healing. And as I listened, I couldn't help but feel this strange, growing courage rising within me. These people, they had walked through their own fires and come out the other side. They weren't perfect, but they were real. And the beauty of it all was, they didn't judge me. They didn't look at my background, my questions, my past, and dismiss me. No, they embraced me. They welcomed me with open arms. They showed me, by how they lived, what it meant to truly live out the love of Christ. But the deeper I got into my understanding, the more the weight of what had happened to me became clear. I knew, deep down, I couldn't keep this journey hidden forever. The thought of sharing this truth with my family, with the community I had known all my life, filled me with a kind of dread I'd never known. I could lose everything. I could be ostracized, shamed, or worse, disowned. The risks felt monumental, but there was this undeniable truth inside me that I couldn't ignore. Jesus had changed me. He had given me a new purpose, a new life, and hiding that felt like I was denying the light he had placed in my heart. One evening, as I sat alone in my room, holding the Bible in my hands, the weight of it all pressed down on me. I prayed, my voice barely above a whisper, "Lord, I'm so afraid. I don't know how they'll take this. I don't know how they'll react, but I know I can't keep this to myself anymore. Please give me the strength to tell them the truth. I need to be honest, no matter what happens." And in that moment, a peace, deep and undeniable, washed over me. It wasn't a peace that made the situation easy, but it was a peace that gave me clarity. I knew what I had to do. I knew that the time had come. The very next morning, I gathered my family together in the living room. My parents, my siblings, even a few extended relatives. Their faces, curious, concerned, stared back at me. They had noticed the change in me, the way I carried myself differently, the calmness in my demeanor, the way I seemed grounded. But they didn't know why. They didn't know what had happened. I stood in front of them, feeling my hands tremble, my heart pounding in my chest. But my voice, somehow, was steady. "I need to tell you something," I began, my voice barely a whisper. "It's about what happened when I was sick. There's something I've been hiding from you, but I can't keep it to myself anymore." As the words left my mouth, the room seemed to hold its breath. I saw the shock, the disbelief, the confusion on their faces. Anger flared in my father's eyes, while my mother's tears started to fall. My siblings, some avoided my gaze, others exchanged silent, uneasy glances. I kept going, despite the weight of their stares, despite the fear that threatened to swallow me whole. I told them everything, the pain I'd been through, the chaos in my mind and body, and what came after. How, when I had reached my lowest point, when I felt like there was no way out, Jesus had appeared to me. I didn't just hear his voice, I felt his presence, his love, his healing. I couldn't deny it. I couldn't pretend it didn't happen. The room was silent when I finished. The only sound was the soft sobbing of my mother. And then my father spoke, his voice barely audible. "Faiza," he said, his voice drained, defeated. "What you're saying, it goes against everything we believe. How can you turn your back on us, on everything we've taught you? How can you reject your family?" I felt my heart shatter at his words. I looked into his eyes, the weight of the moment bearing down on me, and I said, softly but with a resolve I hadn't known I had, "I'm not turning my back on you. I love all of you so much, more than you can imagine. But I can't deny what's happened. Jesus saved me, he healed me, and he showed me the truth. I have to live it, even if it means walking through this alone." My mother's tears flowed more freely now, and my siblings, they said nothing. Their faces were a mix of confusion and sorrow. They didn't understand. They couldn't. Not yet. I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning of something long and difficult. There would be moments of pain and chaos, of rejection, of confusion. But in that silence, I also knew this. I was not alone. I had Jesus. I knew he would give me the strength, the courage to face whatever came next. And that was enough. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of what I had done pressed down on me. But there was also freedom. The truth was out. And even though I didn't know how the future would unfold, I was at peace. I had taken the first step, and with Jesus beside me, I knew I could face whatever came next. Fully committing my life to Jesus wasn't just a one-time decision. It was, and still is, a journey of trust, surrender, and deeper understanding of the grace he offers. After that encounter with him, every part of my life was never the same. Something inside me shifted in ways I couldn't explain, and my world started to tilt on its axis. My priorities changed, and my relationships, those I thought were solid, began to feel unfamiliar, distant. The way I saw the world, the people in it, and even myself had transformed. I wasn't the person I had been before. I could feel the difference. I was in a state of peace I had never known, but it wasn't without its cost. The changes weren't just internal. They hit me in places I never expected, and some of them hurt more than I was prepared for. When I fully embraced Jesus as my savior, it was like I had found a home I didn't know I was looking for. A deep sense of belonging washed over me. His love wasn't conditional, like the love I had known before. It didn't depend on what I did or didn't do. His grace was endless, and his presence was like the air I breathed, always there, always real. I'd spend hours in prayer, not because I had to, but because I longed to be closer to him. In that time, it wasn't about asking for things, it was about knowing him more. The Bible, which once felt distant or just a book of rules, became my lifeline. Passages that I had ignored or glossed over came to life. It was like they were speaking directly to my soul. I finally understood what it meant to be free. Free in a way I'd never imagined. Not free in the sense of having no boundaries, but free in the grace of God, unburdened by guilt or the expectations of others. But even though this new path was full of light and peace, it wasn't without its trials. Some of my family members, who had supported me at first, began to pull away. They couldn't understand the depth of my commitment to Jesus. My father, the man who had always been my anchor, was the hardest to face. It crushed me to see him struggle with my decision. He couldn't understand why I would turn away from the faith of our ancestors, the faith he had taught me. His disappointment hung in the air like a thick fog. "I raised you better than this, Faiza," he told me one night, his voice breaking. "This isn't who you are." I remember looking at him, tears welling in my eyes, the words tumbling out of my mouth before I could stop them. "I know this is hard for you to understand, Baba, but I'm not abandoning you or our family. I'm following the truth I've been shown. Jesus saved me. I can't ignore that." His silence after that was the loudest sound I've ever heard. It stretched on for days, then weeks, and every conversation we had after that felt colder, more distant. The tension was thick between us, and I felt the weight of his disapproval pressing on me. My siblings, though, they were different. Some of them didn't fully understand, but they were more open-minded. They asked questions, curious about Jesus, about the Bible. They listened. Some remained silent, though, watching me from the sidelines, unsure of how to approach what I was going through. My mother, torn between her love for me and her fear of how the community would react, was caught in the middle. She was afraid of losing me to something she didn't fully understand, but she also loved me in a way that she couldn't turn away from. And then there was the community. Their reaction came swiftly. It wasn't long before the whispers began. People who had once been close to me, friends I'd known my entire life, started pulling away. Invitations stopped coming, calls stopped being made, faces that had once been warm turned cold. I felt the weight of that rejection. It was hard. I was alone in a way that I had never been before, but I held on to one thing: Jesus' promise. He told me I would never be truly alone, and in those moments, when everything around me seemed to fall apart, that promise was all I had. Yet, in the midst of that rejection, there were sparks of light. There were a few who stuck by me. They didn't fully understand my journey, but they respected it. They didn't walk away. They listened, encouraged me, and reminded me that I wasn't forgotten. Their support, small as it was, gave me the strength to keep going when I felt like I couldn't take another step. Sharing my story with others wasn't something I ever thought I'd do. I knew it would invite judgment, criticism, and probably a lot of questions I wasn't ready to answer. But something inside me knew that this was what I was called to do. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Jesus and his love. The first time I stood in front of a group to share my testimony, I was shaking. My hands were clammy. My heart was racing. I had no idea how they'd react, but I knew I had to speak. I told them everything about the illness, about the near-death experience, and about the overwhelming love I felt in Jesus' presence. I shared how he healed me, how he brought me back from the edge, not just physically, but spiritually. I talked about how his grace had transformed my life. When I finished, the room was completely silent, not a sound. I felt the weight of every eye on me, but I held my ground. Then, finally, a woman stood up. Tears were streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "Your story, it's given me hope." From that moment, I felt a shift in the deepest part of my soul. There was no turning back, no way to undo what I had just experienced. It was as though a veil had been lifted, and I understood my purpose with a clarity that was undeniable. My mission was simple yet profound: to share the love, the grace, the unwavering hope of Jesus with everyone I could possibly reach. I knew in my heart, like a flame that could not be extinguished, that my life would never be the same again. And so I started speaking, first at churches, then at community centers, and even in living rooms, where people would gather in quiet circles to hear what I had to say. Each encounter was different. Some faces were skeptical, their brows furrowed in doubt, others filled with raw emotion, moved by the depth of my story. And then there were those who, from the very first word, leaned in, eager for something more, something they had been searching for without even knowing it. The reactions varied, but what remained constant was the seed I planted with every word I spoke. A seed that wasn't mine to force to grow. That was God's work, not mine. My role was only to share what I had seen, what had been revealed to me, and trust that he would do the rest. In those moments, I realized that it wasn't just about recounting the events of what had happened to me. It was about connecting with people on a level far deeper than just sharing facts. I listened to their doubts, their fears, the places in their lives where they felt broken, And I shared their struggles, their pain, the raw, real moments that we all go through. But I also celebrated their victories, no matter how small they seemed. I wasn't just a person telling a story. I was a living testimony of God's grace, standing as proof that He still moves, He still heals, and He still changes lives. Reconciliation with my family wasn't immediate. It was a journey, slow, sometimes painful, but never without hope. My father, who had been distant, skeptical of everything I was now living for, began to notice the change in me. One evening, as we sat together, he turned to me with a softness I hadn't heard in his voice for months. "You're different," he said, his words like a quiet confession. "You're happier." I smiled at him, my heart full of tenderness for the man who had once been so hard to reach. "I am, Baba," I said, my voice steady, but with a depth that came from knowing the truth. "I found the truth, and I pray that one day you'll see it too." There was a long pause. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there, something I hadn't seen in years. Maybe it was doubt, maybe it was hope, but in that moment, I knew the seeds were beginning to take root. My mother, ever the peacekeeper, took a quieter approach. She didn't ask many questions in front of others, but when it was just the two of us, she would look at me with a curiosity that spoke volumes. "What did Jesus mean to you?" she would ask, her voice gentle, as if she feared her question would shatter something. Those moments when I could answer her with honesty, even when the words felt like they were too big for me to say, filled me with hope. Her curiosity, her quiet search, kept me going. Through it all, I leaned on my spiritual family. The church became my second home, my safe haven. It was where I found my strength when I felt weak, where I found the encouragement to keep going when the world seemed to be closing in. My community didn't just accept me, they embraced me. They reminded me of God's promises, and they held me up when I wasn't sure how to stand on my own. Together, we weathered the highs and lows, the triumphs and the struggles. Looking back, I see how God's hand was in every single step of my journey, from the illness that almost took me to the moment I came face to face with Jesus, to the challenges and triumphs that followed. It was all part of a bigger plan, one I could never have imagined. What once seemed like a burden to bear now feels like a blessing to share. A life, a story, meant to inspire others, meant to shine a light in places where darkness once reigned. As I reflect on everything that has led me here, I can't help but marvel at God's grace. How He took a frightened, lost little girl and turned her into something unrecognizable, yet beautiful. How He gave me a second chance at life, a chance to spread His love, to be a messenger of His truth. There's one thing I've learned through all of this. It's that God's plans are always so much greater than our own. His love is boundless, His grace unending, and His truth, it changes everything. And to anyone who might be listening to this story, I want to say this. Don't be afraid to search for the truth. Don't be afraid to question everything you've ever known, even if it shakes you to your core. God's love is for everyone, no matter where you come from, no matter what you've done. He's waiting for you, just like He was waiting for me. If you're lost, if you feel like the world is too much, if you don't know where to turn, open your heart. Jesus changed my life in ways I never thought possible, and I promise you, He can do the same for you. Thank you for listening to my story. If anything here has touched you, if you felt even a fraction of what I felt, I encourage you to reach out. Share your thoughts, share your prayer requests, or explore other testimonies. Let's continue this journey of faith together. Let's trust in the one who makes all things new.